But before we get started, I've confirmed that Sophie understands confidentiality and its limits, and there aren't any ethical or risk concerns that would affect the upcoming session. So today I'll be walking you through my intervention plan for Sophie, our 32-year-old postgraduate student from Assignment 1. Sophie herself presents with chronic procrastination and significant difficulty initiating tasks. These patterns appear closely linked to weaknesses in working memory, planning, and susceptibility to cognitive overload. These difficulties lead her to delay starting tasks to get short-term relief from anxiety. But this then results in last-minute rushing, fatigue, and a sense of failure. So, with this in mind, the long-term goal is to help Sophie reliably plan, start, and complete tasks across both academic and work settings. Strengthening this consistency should improve not only her productivity, but also her anxiety and increase her confidence and sense of control. For this next session, the short-term goal is to teach and practice the task breakdown protocol, and for Sophie to walk away with a concrete, personalized 48-hour plan initiating one real assignment. This directly matches her executive functioning profile and gives her an achievable behavioral win to build on. I'll be using a cognitive behavioral therapy for adult ADHD, drawing on Safran and colleagues' behavioral model. This approach directly targets the mechanisms maintaining Sophicle's difficulties, namely avoidance, working memory limitations, distractibility, and the anxiety that arises from repeated underperformance. With this framework, task initiation is the most meaningful starting point. It's consistently where she becomes stuck, and once that happens, it tends to activate her familiar cycle, avoiding the task, becoming more anxious, and then relying on last minute overwork to cope. Strengthening initiation reduces cognitive overload, disrupts avoidance, and supports more consistent task engagement. The CBT ADHD literature also highlights that early behavioral wins, especially around initiation, tend to drive improvements in confidence, productivity, and anxiety, making this an ideal therapeutic focus. Sophie's strengths, including her insight, motivation, and strong verbal reasoning, make her well suited for CBT's structured, collaborative style. Starting with behavioral skill acquisition is also appropriate, given that anxiety appears secondary to long-standing executive functioning challenges. There are several client factors that are likely to shape how this session unfolds. Firstly, Sophie tends to digress and lose the conversational thread. To manage this, I use a clear collaborative agenda and a visual timer to help maintain focus without becoming overly directive. Second, she experiences significant shame and anxiety around her procrastination and often holds quite self-critical beliefs about her performance. Normalizing ADHD-related executive functioning difficulties through gentle psychoeducation could help reduce avoidance and increase engagement. Third, her working memory challenges mean she benefits from externalizing information. So I'll rely on visible task breakdowns, written steps, and collaborative worksheets to support her across the session. Finally, her strengths, insight, motivation, and strong verbal reasoning position her well for CBT's structured, collaborative behavioral work and should support her engagement in the task breakdown protocol. There are also several clinician factors that I need to be mindful of. First, given Sophie's family history of ADHD and her attentional difficulties, there is a risk of diagnostic overshadowing, interpreting her difficulties through one lens too quickly. So I'll address this by grounding my decisions in observable behavioral patterns, continuing to integrate both qualitative and functional information, and using supervision to check my assumptions. Second, I'm aware of my tendency to rely heavily on structured frameworks and provide detailed explanations. which could lead to often too much psychoeducation or too many strategies at once. This might overwhelm Sophie. So to avoid this, I'll prioritize one core behavioral technique, keep explanations brief, and check in frequently about pacing and clarity. Finally, because Sophie is highly digressive, there's a possibility that I may become overly directive in trying to keep the session on track. To prevent that, I'll use collaborative agenda setting and transparent redirection so structure is maintained without compromising rapport. Now I'll briefly walk through the step-by-step plan for the next session. The session will run for about 50 minutes and follow a standard CBT structure. First, I'll begin with a brief check-in in the agenda setting. So I'll do a quick mood and SUDS check and then collaborate with Sophie to confirm that today's focus is on improving task initiation and practicing one concrete skill. Secondly, I'll review the key themes from the assessment. I'll normalize her executive functioning difficulties and map her procrastination onto the avoidance anxiety last minute rush cycle so she can clearly see why we're targeting initiation in particular. Third, I'll provide a short piece of psychoeducation to set up the skill. I'll explain that breaking down tasks into small, specific steps reduces cognitive overload and makes starting less overwhelming. This gives a clear rationale for the task breakdown protocol. Fourth, I'll teach the task breakdown protocol itself. I'll demonstrate it using a simple example and walk her through the steps of identifying a task trigger, breaking the task into micro steps, estimating how long each one might take, writing the steps down, and linking the first step to a specific cue in her day. Fifth, we'll move into guided practice. Together, we'll apply the protocol to one real assignment she's been avoiding. I'll check in with SUDS ratings as we go, so we can notice any spikes in overwhelm and adjust the size of the steps if needed. The aim here is for her to experience the process as doable and to build a sense of mastery. 6. We'll develop a concrete 48-hour action plan. We'll choose one micro step that she feels confident to complete in the next 2 days, and we'll identify environmental supports such as setting up a workspace, reducing distractions, and deciding when and where she will start. We'll write this plan down to support her working memory. 7th, we'll troubleshoot likely barriers. So I'll invite Sophie to think about what might get in the way, such as perfectionism, drifting into other tasks, or feeling mentally overloaded. And we'll develop coping statements and simple accountability strategies so she feels prepared to manage those obstacles. Finally, I'll set some homework and gather feedback. Her homework will be to complete the first micro step and briefly track her attempts to start. So I'll end the session asking for feedback on how clear and useful the session felt and whether the pace and the structure worked for her. Overall, this session is deliberately focused and behavioral. Aim is for Sophie to experience a successful start on a real task because early behavioral wins are strongly associated with improved motivation, confidence, and long-term engagement in CBT for ADHD. I'll review her progress with this plan in our next supervision meeting.